Everybody is running, but not everybody is winning. I know all my problems will be solved simply if I japa. All I need to is escape this country and my life will be wonderful. This country I must run by any means possible. Now listen carefully. The greatest enemy of our access to anything that is being unveiled to us by God is the flesh. Carnality. That is the greatest enemy. If you don't learn to tame the flesh, you will not be able to obtain what the Spirit is showing. 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14, the Bible tells us there, 1 Corinthians 2:14, it said, the natural or the carnal man cannot receive the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. It takes a man, a woman, a boy, a girl in the Spirit to gain access to what it is that God is showing. So you must be in the Spirit. You must be in the Spirit. Revelation chapter 4 verse 1 and 2. Look at what the Bible tells us here. It said, after this I looked, and behold, the door was open in heaven. And the first voice which I heard, as it were the voice of a trumpet talking with me, which said, come up hither, and I will show you the things which must be hereafter. And look at verse 2. And immediately I was in the Spirit. So when he was talking about come up hither, he was not talking about a physical ascension to a place. He was talking about being in the Spirit. I was in the Spirit. Immediately I was in the Spirit. If we are going to pick what God is saying, then you and I must learn to be in the Spirit. Be in the Spirit. That is why whatever it is that chokes or continues to energize our flesh, we must be cautious with it. You find so many people today claiming they want to hear God, but they are feeding the carnal nature and starving the spiritual nature. It takes a charged up spirit man to be able to pick what the Spirit is saying. Shout hallelujah. It's so important. So there is a demand for us to ensure that we learn to be in the Spirit. Life is too precious to live it by chance. And in order to pick what the Spirit is saying, we must learn to be in the Spirit. He said, immediately I was in the Spirit. And I was in the Spirit because he said, come up hither. If you are going to pick what the Spirit is saying, then you and I must learn to be in the Spirit. Number 3 is be meek. Be meek. Meekness talks about humility, being teachable. Matthew chapter 11 verse 28 and 29, Jesus said, come unto me all of you that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He said, come and learn of me, because I am meek and I am lowly in heart. If you want to pick what God is showing, there is a need to be meek. Psalm 25 and verse 14. Psalm 25 and verse 14. Verse 9, sorry. Psalm 25 and verse 9. The Bible tells us there, it said, the meek will he guide in judgment. The meek will he teach his way. The meek will he guide. God is only in the habit of talking to the meek. Who is the meek? The humble, the teachable. So pride and arrogance has the capacity to deafen our spiritual hearing. Pride and arrogance. And why is that? So many times the things God will say to you may not be the things that you want to hear. They may not be the things that you want to do. For example, you talk about the subject of vision. If you are going to pick what God is saying, you must surrender what you have been thinking. Many of us come to God asking for his plan, but we come to him with our own plan. This is what I want to do. And as a result of that, you find yourself stranded. I've shared this story many times. I remember while as a young boy, I always known the necessity of picking God's purpose. But I had many plans that I wanted to do. And over the years, I began to document those plans, record those plans, and began to organize those plans. But I knew that God had a plan for me, But I really wanted my plan to work. So anytime I will come to God, I will say, Lord, show me your plan for my life. Show me your plan for my... But inside me, I knew that the plan for my life is the one I've written down. So I wanted him to just say, my son, what you have written down is correct. Go ahead and follow it. So I will go and I'll pray. And once I pray and I don't hear anything, I will go and continue developing my plan. I will continue developing my plan. But I got to a point in life where I discovered that it would be a tragedy to run through the journey of life and conclude the race only to find out that I have not begun. So I went to God for the first time. I remember I heard a story and that story stuck with me. A man came to a particular church and he entered into the church he was a very elderly man at that period of time, late 70s. Entered into the church and in the midst of the service, he began to weep profusely. And the pastor saw this elderly man crying. And he said to himself, after the service, I will get this man to find out what's going on. The man, before the service concluded, he stood up and left. The second day, the man came again. And during the service was weeping profusely. And the pastor thought to himself, after the service, I will pick this man and find out what is wrong. But before the service ended, he stood up and quickly left. So the third day, the pastor asked the ushers, if you see any elderly man who is crying, just hold him for me. So after the service, they heard the man, our pastor wants to see you. And they brought him to the pastor. And he said, sir, I noticed 2 days ago, you were weeping. Yesterday, you were weeping. Today again, you are weeping. What exactly is wrong? And this man began to tell him how that many years ago, God had called him. He had found what God wanted him to do. And he had called him into the ministry. But he didn't want to go into ministry. So he got into business and did very well. Had a lot of money, had a lot of assets. Now was a retired businessman at the twilight of his life. But he entered into that church, and as he entered, God opened his eyes to see that the exact plan that he had given to him many years ago, that is the plan of the building that was to be built, was the exact building that he was standing in. So he brought out the paper, old yellow paper, and showed it to the pastor. And the pastor said when he looked at the plan, everything on that paper was exactly what was in that building. What was wrong at this time? Why was he weeping? He was ending his life to discover he had not even begun his race. Now listen to me very carefully. Life is a race. And the only way to run your race in life is to find your lane in vision. And until you find your lane in vision, no matter what you seem to attain in life, it will not matter. Now, listen very carefully. This is so important for us to understand this. I remember in secondary school, we used to have, my secondary school when we were, running track. Our track field didn't have where where the fans should sit. So they would sit inside the circle. And when we were running, I remember one day we were running 200 meters race. And we began to run and run and run. And some of us who were inside were running and hailing the other runners. And I discovered one of them who was running was ahead of all of us who were the runners. He got to the finish line first, hailing everybody. But because it was not his race, he had no prize to win. That day I learned a lesson. Everybody is running, but not everybody is winning. You cannot win a race for which heaven has not registered you. Is somebody getting what God is saying? Until you are registered by heaven in a race, no matter how fast you run, you cannot be acclaimed a winner. So winning in the adventure of life is the product of locating your race and running that race. I know there are so many of us with many wonderful plans. Plans of how you feel you can make it in life. Like the person who was here, that prisoner of hope that was saying, look, I know all my problems will be solved simply if I jackpot. That is, if I just jackpot, that is the answer to all my problems. All I need to is escape this country and my life will be wonderful. The truth is this. You must come to God in meekness, because some of us, that's a part we don't even want to hear. If you come to travel, God, don't go there. Travel, leave that side alone. Any other thing you want to say, say. But this country I must run. I'm by any means possible. They don't want to hear anything else. But listen to me. When it comes to making the most of your life, that's where meekness comes. Recognizing that, look, God knows better than I do. He sees the future clearer than I do. So I must come before him in humility. The meek will he guide in judgment. The meek will he teach his way.